Now tuned in.
Okay.
You are now tuned in to Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flippin' the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
We were so close. We were so close to getting
Well,
it.
I think the live started after I messed up. So I think we're good. I think we saw it, but I don't know if they saw it.
They might have saw me laughing, and then we went into the intro, which was kind of funny, but maybe not. I don't know.
A little BTS, a little behind the scenes.
A little behind the scenes, or maybe just the scenes. I'm not quite sure myself. Haven't seen the replay.
Yeah. So if you're tuned in 2 seconds late, perfect intro.
Perfect.
You didn't miss a thing. Welcome to Flipping the Birds. Training camp just started. We're starting to get closer to football. Eric, how you feeling, man?
I'm excited. Not just because I wouldn't be excited. I'm 35 years old today, which means I'm dirt. I'm older than dirt. I'm just normal dirt, I guess. Well, okay, maybe not older than, but just normal dirt.
Happy birthday on that note.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, thanks. But yeah, no, I'm just excited for football. I mean, it's around the corner, and I saw an advertisement when I was on vacation for the Packers and Eagles game. So anytime you see ads running on TV for it, you just know, especially when it's your team. It's time to get excited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, training camp's kind of been going the way we thought for the most part, but that's a good sign because I think things that we're hoping to see, we're seeing. Quinyon Mitchell being featured early. Isaiah Rodgers seems to be as advertised. Offensive line's figuring it out. Jordan Davis looks healthier. Jalen Carter's been disruptive. Jalen Hurts has been doing really well. So all the things you hope to see. We always kind of have that back and forth on how much you can really take from training camp and how much it really matters. Et cetera, et cetera. But all the indicators to, starting the season off on a good note seem to be in place. But there are a few things we're going to talk about today. Starting obviously with the conversation we had to have every week, which is apparently new updates, but the same updates, just kind of phrased in different ways and things kind of cementing on the relationship between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. So how are you feeling? Again, it feels like it's just like Love Island or something like that. We're dealing with drama every week about this kind of stuff, but how are you feeling with this update?
So it just seems like it's not really a willing to coexist. I feel like Jalen Hurts is the professional and Nick Sirianni should be more than comfortable kind of being a hands-off manager, kind of like how Mike was talking about when he was on our show. Because what we learned with his press conference, or one of his first press conferences, even dating back to last week, was that he was about as hands-on with getting the coordinators as, a scout would be getting a prospect. So if that's the case and it's really his decision, and now knowing what we've confirmed to know now, that all of last year it had nothing to do with Brian Johnson, it had everything to do with Sirianni. Well, the answer is he needs to let Kellen Moore do his thing, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I think, Kellen Moore and that Jalen Hurts dynamic is going to be the one that we'll be focusing on as the season goes. But right now, for this conversation that will probably be a weekly number, I don't think there's any real drama, surfacing. So anything that's really being, spoken about, just kind of, I think, clickbait. You can take it to be clickbait at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as much as there's, maybe some developments in the story, like what we're really talking about is in the past, right?
Right.
I think that whether or not the problem was Nick Sirianni or how that problem manifested or how much of it was his, issue and his doing, on paper, you've solved the issue, right? You've brought it in. better coordinator, someone with a little bit more experience, and Sirianni is seemingly more hands off and allowing him to do his thing. So wherever or however you got to this problem, it seems to be the solution is in-house, which is fantastic. Now, obviously, you have to diagnose issues as a front office. If Sirianni is that big of a problem, you're going to find out. Like, you're going to find out pretty early in the season how hands off he can be. As soon as you have that adversity in the season, right? People kind of defect and defer to what they, are at their core. And if Nick Sirianni has changed, if he's, developed, if he's going to be that hands-off CEO, GM, I feel like we find out early. But either way, like, if that's the case, like, the solution is you bring in a guy like Kellen Moore. So, whatever the issue is, and as much as, again, the development shed light on the story, that's great and everything like that. Like you said, seems to be mostly clickbait because at this point you're dealing with the past. Like, the solution has been attained. Like, you're moving forward now. So it's a little bit of a shame, but it feels like we're going to be talking about this every week, like you said.
And it even goes back to a little bit what we were talking about last week. Like, if Kellen Moore, and the Eagles offense has a really successful season, then what comes of it? I think it doubles down even further that he would probably be the successor. There's a really good running chance that the Eagles would try to make him the successor. So there's a lot more to be gained by Kellen Moore if Sirianni doesn't just kind of start to do the right, relationship and decision, based things as a manager rather than a coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the one indication, that's been ascertained, I guess, a little bit from training camp is Jalen Hurts seemed to be firing on all cylinders so far.
Right.
Had a lot of good days. Again, you never know how much training camp's really an indicator, but it seems like he's kind of found his mojo. Made a lot of plays in the passing game. Obviously, that's easier to do when it's a lot of skeleton defense and et cetera, his training camp and all that. But seems to be trusting his receivers, giving them opportunities, throwing the deep ball well. There was reports he even looked more mobile, which I feel like helps a lot going into the season. Maybe that knee issue is bigger than we let on, but all the news coming out of training camp seems to be that Jalen Hurts is kind of on the right track, that all the things we keep bringing up haven't deterred from the goal of this season.
Yeah, I wonder how just simply there's a refreshing offense. It's not stale. It's not the same. It's because what we saw was bland at times, and there didn't really seem like there was much of a direction last season. So with there being purpose behind an actual, fitting scheme, or at least a new scheme, maybe that's a better way to put it. I wonder if just how much this is Jalen Hurts being refreshed, and that's how he looks more mobile, but there's also better play designs to kind of get him out there in the run and use his assets.
Yeah, like I feel like last year, they had the conversation about how there's a lot of room for creativity, et cetera. But I think we kind of saw the downfall of when that's kind of unbridled and not measured. You kind of just let the offense run wild, and then now you have kind of more of a structure where he's able to freestyle within. That would indicate, really positive things for the offense. And I think we were going to transition kind of to talk about the defense, but since we're on the offensive side of the ball,
right.
One of the things that's going to obviously determine how good this offense is, and probably the biggest question mark on offense, maybe outside of wide receiver 3, is just that offensive line, specifically the interior of that offensive line. Mekhi Becton's been getting snaps at guard. It didn't look great early when he was, clearly out of shape for day one. I think he was, puking like 100 times or something like that. I think, whatever food he ate for the last 3 years is now out of his system, or whatever it is, what dramatized version of it that, people post for training camp, but has gotten more snaps with the ones, and has looked pretty good. They just signed Nick Gates, a veteran interior offensive lineman, today. So clearly bolstering that. Do you think the signing indicates, anything deeper than, hey, this is just great value, let's just add to the roster? Do you think there's any kind of worry there? How do you feel about the offensive line overall?
I think you've kind of nailed it, that it's more of just a value depth addition. I think I actually heard that just as by looking at different sources that you'll check out, and reading different articles. Shout out to Philly Sports Network for putting together some good pieces and featuring this. I think Liam might have did this and featured a little bit about Mekhi Becton, but a lot of people have been kind of getting behind Mekhi Becton and saying he looks like a beast in camp. I mean, so I guess there was a time where he, sources say quote unquote projectile. But at the same time, if he's recovered from that and he looks like he can be rekindled with Jeff Stoutland, then you got a guy who was 11th overall with the Jets in 2020, who can be, have that potential maybe finally untapped. And now you're just talking about wild pipe dreams here, but finally having some, depth that if something were to happen, you don't have to worry about anything because it's kind of like implanting another starting lineman.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you want. And this is what, the Jeff Stoutland effect could be, especially with a talent like Mekhi Becton. So he's an interesting watch, at least for a player to keep your eye on throughout the training camp so far.
Yeah, it's been an interesting shift, I think, on the offensive line. I think the Eagles are used to drafting guys and then letting Jeff Stoutland develop them. And obviously have had to spend their draft picks on different positions. They had to get better at certain positions, had to use their draft picks there this year on the secondary. So it's interesting now to see Howie Roseman kind of change up the strategy and bring in some veteran guys that maybe haven't fully reached their potential, fell out of favor with the previous coaching staff. Like Gates they're bringing in, he's got plenty of playing time experience, right? And that's, you allow him to work with a guy like Jeff Stoutland. This guy's really, he's still going to be a backup, but his development obviously is going to, expand, right? Jeff Stoutland's a wizard, right? Clearly on paper, one of the best, but, we know in Philly, the best positional coach for any team, I feel like personally, and has developed, no offense to the guys that came before, but with way less, right? Now you're getting a bunch of veterans who you can develop, who you can show a new offense. It's cool to see Howie Roseman kind of shift that strategy and really hoping it pays off, because if it does, it's a fantastic move.
Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of, what Becton was kind of saying about himself, but what he's basically doing right now is it seems like he's shadowing a bunch of the starting linemen, something like Lane Johnson, Dickerson, Mel Latta, all those. So he's able to be flexible down the line, which that's how he's gonna have a role and find his seat in Philadelphia, and maybe for the long term. He might be a project where Stoutland really gets his teeth in there, and it's like, okay, now we have a starter. Like, maybe that's for the time being, you kind of do have one eye looking on the shoulder of Lane Johnson, saying, okay, he's been battling injuries, it seems like every single season. When is that finally going to we have to pay our day there? And maybe Becton is the guy that steps in. He's like a sponge right now, and as a guy who was looked at as a first round pick previously, I just think that Philadelphia was probably the best thing that's ever happened to his career.
Yeah, clearly talented. You get another shot to develop under one of the league's best, but it's also surrounded by some of the league's best as well. You're not getting thrown into a situation like Minnesota had a couple years ago where there's just nothing there. Since he's had to rehab their offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many teams where these veteran guys are getting signed to be the cornerstone of that offensive line, and instead he comes into Philly where there's already plenty of established pieces, really just trying to fill that one position where there's a gap. And I think you couldn't really ask for any better situations as a veteran offensive lineman.
Now, other parts of the offensive line, we go down to players like Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens. So Dickerson was actually missed a little bit of camp today, but he returned, so no real sweat there. But I think it's really important, and this kind of pertains to a question asked by the media to Dickerson about Jurgens, but I think it's really important to kind of not put the pressure of like a Jason Kelsey on Cam Jurgens as he's kind of developing into what he could be a career Eagle.
Congratulations again. To be an uncle. But yeah, exactly. Like you bring in a guy that's still young, right, and still has
Right.
a lot of years ahead of him if he can figure it out. And like I said, just a different way of getting young players for Jeff Stellan to develop. But if it works out, it should be fantastic. And you talk about that Dickerson and Jurgens, those two interior offensive linemen. I think that there's concern about when you lose a guy like Jason Kelsey, but I think that's overshadowing just how excited we should be about Cam Jurgens. A fantastic player. Now you get the chance to kind of take the training wheels off, see him at what will be his position for the next, hopefully, decade with the Eagles.
Right.
He's a really talented, really special player. And I think as much as it absolutely sucks to lose a guy whose jersey probably should be hung in the rafters, you got to be excited for this young guy. Like, I just feel like that this tandem could be in a couple of years, you could be talking about the best 1-2 punch in the interior offensive line. And then you add in this factor at the other guard position where you could get some development from Mekhi Becton. This could be a force for years to come. And they're all young. They're all developing. Mailata's still going to be in the picture for a while. Lane, you need to find a replacement for him eventually, but has shown no signs of slowing down. You probably get another, hopefully 2, maybe 3 years out of him. Who knows? The Eagles are in a great position.
It's fantastic to have this kind of youth, but talent on your team, and even the depth, kind of seems talented. I'm still very excited to see guys like we drafted Keegan in the in this year's draft. I think that he's going to have he looks like a guy that has such a mean streak in him, where like he belongs on the Philadelphia Eagles line. So, like, I look forward to him and just seeing what he has in the future. But, I mean, these are guys that, quite frankly, this season and maybe even next season, do you really think that they would be starters? Like, how soon do you think those guys could be starters? Probably, 2 to 3 years from now is what I'm projecting. And tell Eric to smile. It's not my 40th birthday. I'm 35. It's different. It's a little bit that's older dirt.
But yeah, no, absolutely. So the offensive line, I feel like they're in good shape. But kind of flipping over to what we're going to talk about first is the defense. Got a little bit of insight from Vic Fangio about how the defense is going to shake out. Obviously, gave a nod to the younger guys, but was open and honest about the fact that if they do play and get playing time, they're going to have to earn it. So kind of gave us insight without saying anything definitive. Clearly, it's going to be a battle. The young guys are going to get an opportunity to battle it out. And the veterans, most likely will get the leg up. It is complicated defense to learn. We're talking generally about the secondary when we talk about young guys, is that's where they added to the most. But, it seems like it's going to be an open battle. Who do you think you're kind of most excited to see? Well, what do you think that means for the younger guys? How do you feel like that shakes out in the secondary? And I think an overlooked is, how do you feel like it shakes out in that front seven? Do you think Nolan Smith is now more in the conversation, et cetera?
I think in the secondary, the most exciting player to watch is the most obvious answer, and it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell. I think, and from what we've heard today, right? Like, he's been all over AJ Brown, and AJ Brown's, one of the top 10 receiver in all of the NFL. So we're talking about a rookie who's allegedly, all over AJ Brown. And then to get AJ Brown open, because he did catch a touchdown, it was a scheme call and a motion by Moore. So it's like, okay, now you have a competent coordinator if he notices that his, one of his top receivers is on lockdown, that he can still get him open. But either way, that's a mark of, Quinyon Mitchell doing a fantastic job in camp. So that's the one you're most excited for. I think how that would affect the front seven, if you have a guy who's able to play that kind of man coverage and you're able to lock down receivers like that, then I'm expecting a season where the defensive line is more than competent in their scheme. I don't know how many sacks they get because it's a first-year scheme, but at the same time, I think you're seeing something where quarterbacks have to kind of really fight to be efficient. So we might be on the winning end of a lot of passing defense. Now, how they can use that sort of aggression against the run, we'll see, because the linebackers are still my huge question mark.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's the one area of training camp so far we haven't really been, eased into the situation at all as a linebacker, right? Zach Bond's been out there. He seems like he's been solid. Nothing to write home about. And then really, in this defense, you're using those outside linebackers to blitz. And so we have heard good news about linebackers, but it's been, Bryce Huff, right? And it sounds like by all accounts, he's been pretty, disruptive. And also Nolan Smith has, gotten an opportunity to play with the ones, rotate in, and apparently he's been looking good. So you hope that to overcome the coverage of the linebackers, you're able to generate pressure. It sounds like the best and most viable way the Eagles are going to generate pressure this year is in the interior. And both of those guys with Jordan Davis, I should go 3 deep realistically, because Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams, that's a pretty disruptive, 3 deep, and however you want to use them. Again, except for Jordan Davis, you might put him on the outside, but if you're going with the 30 front, both Milton Williams and Jalen Carter can play any position along that defensive line, and then you can rotate guys in that are smaller, better rushing the quarterback. It's really just about keeping your opponent in second and long situations, and then playing good coverage. And so you hope that on first down they can stop the run with the linebackers, and that's the hope. The news has been wishy-washy, so. How do you feel, I guess, going in, hearing all this about this defense? Are you still concerned? Is there any hope that there's some development there?
Yeah, I do think there's going to be there's a ton of room for development. I think that there's a lot of hope that in that defense. There's a lot of belief from the players, and that's a dangerous thing because, I've seen that as far as hockey is concerned with the Flyers last year. If there's a team, that believes will probably find a way to overachieve, and that's the Eagles defense right now. I think that's the read. They have to overachieve because I believe the secondary is improved. I like the defensive line, but the meat and potatoes of the defense between the safeties and the linebackers is still a huge question. And there are teams that are more than willing to take the top off the defense and also, exploit that by setting up the run. That's pretty much 101 how you would run an offense against us. So, yeah, you worry about that, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And if, the picks that were made before can develop the right way, then we're hoping that, that's pretty much the trend this year. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's what worries me most about this defense too, is the deep shot. And I think, again, like you're hoping Vic Fangio's defense, they're good at disguising things, but, Darius Slay didn't always look as fast as he used to last year. You're not really sure who it's going to be at safety. Obviously, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is the one set in stone, and he's pretty good, playing that single high, but also is prone to, making, jumping on the ball, right, and having his eyes in the wrong place, et cetera, et cetera. You love that aggression from him, but sometimes, there's obviously the trade-off there. Reed Blankenship, he's a really talented athlete, but, long speed. He's pretty fast, but there are going to be receivers you go against that are just faster. It's that deep shot, that long ball. You talk about who you have to beat. You eventually have to beat the Chiefs if you are going to the Super Bowl, most likely. Right. They just added so much speed. It just feels like that you could play a fantastic game in the secondary, and then you just get 1 deep shot, 2 deep shots for touchdowns, and you just can't recover from that. So that's my biggest concern, and the one way to alleviate that is the pass rush. We're going to see how that kind of works out. But, either they do that and it works out, or, they just other teams just march down the field because they can't stop with linebackers. So I'm a bit worried. But the good news is The young guys seem to be developing. They're going to get opportunities. But it still worries me a little bit with that defense.
Yeah, and you bring up a pretty good point about the guys like in our safeties like Reed Blankenship. I believe Reed Blankenship is probably one of our better tacklers on our defense, and that's just from what I can tell, basically by him flying around the field last season. It seemed like at times he was the only person. And you got to excuse the dog. Lenny's, somebody's apparently at the door. But with Blankenship, he's somebody who I've seen make more than a few tackles where it looked like no one else on the team was able to do so. Yeah, I do worry about him being beaten over the top. You bring up a good point, like the Chiefs. Like this defense can be a solid defense against most teams, but contending teams are going to be teams that are going to be able to take the top off of defense and exploit pretty much our weaknesses. I think from what we have here with Fangio defense, it's more of a bend but don't break kind of defense. And obviously with personnel, that's going to get better and the longer that he stays here. But for this season is a huge measuring stick of, okay, like maybe what players in that, linebacking core or the safeties are good enough to stick around to next season. Because, we haven't seen, again, I'm going to harp on this all year, but Nakobe Dean, that's a huge question mark, right? Like what of he at all in the NFL versus not just, in Fangio's defense. So yeah, like that these are a bunch of questions where in the defense I'm still concerned, but I think there's a lot of hope in that locker room as well, where the outside I think is pretty secure, and I think our defensive line can do a lot of damage. So I think maybe that becomes contagious. Maybe we're completely looking at this in a way where hey, we don't expect a lot and we'll be blown away. But I don't know. It just has more warts than it does Band-Aids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of the one area where you have to win this year, an area where they didn't necessarily win last year is big plays on defense, right? And so with the big shots, it's a worry, but you hope this year that they capitalize on the opportunities they kind of left on the table last year. Obviously, didn't get very good play from their other outside corner, James Bradbury. You're hoping that improves immediately. But a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, I'm going to kind of bring that back full circle, is one of those guys you watch his tape, man, he just makes plays, right? There's some plays that he has no business making. His hands are on the football. He's disruptive. The nice thing about these young guys getting opportunities is kind of that X factor, right? Where you can make plays. And so we know what we're getting out of Darius Slay. He's going to come up with an interception or two. We've seen that kind of fall off a couple times. You're not going to see that 2 interception game against the Vikings and Justin Jefferson all the time. But he's serviceable, right? You need that kind of X factor. I feel like that's why hearing about Quinyon Mitchell getting plays earlier is so exciting, right? We don't really know what he could bring. And if the defense can figure out a way to turn those plays where they left on the field or didn't quite capitalize into turnovers, most importantly, but even just big plays, big knockdowns, big 3rd and 10s, this defense goes from, I'm not really sure about them, it's an okay defense, to, wow, this is a really fantastic defense.
And I think something that would put the mind a little bit at ease is if you had Cooper out there, getting his reps in, like I think that would be something that, I would feel more comfortable about with our safeties and corners and the depth, that could probably resurface during the season. But as of right now, there's going to be a lot of, I guess there's going to be a curve to say the least, when he's back. So. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how we see offense and defense so far. The one next week will be the first for last podcast. Sorry, before we actually get football. How do you feel about training camp, or how do you feel about preseason? By the way, Eric, I know that there's mixed reviews on preseason. They talked about reducing it. They talked about like not having it at all, what are your thoughts on preseason? I'm always curious.
I always liked watching, which players could probably steal a roster spot and, kind of having my predictions, as the cuts go on. I think there's a little bit of drama that goes into that. Yeah, I mean, it being 3 games or 4 games, whatever, I don't really care. Like, I like it all the same as far as the length. I guess people want to do without it completely, but I feel like you would have sloppy football at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So there is a purpose to it. You wish everybody, obviously, the best in terms of health, because you don't want to see any marketable players, pretty much from a league standpoint, go down during preseason, or any ones from your team as a favoritism, I guess, standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I do like watching it. That there is something about going out there and watching like Kenny Pickett, like play for the Eagles. Like there is something for that.
For sure.
There is something about like probably Jalen Hunt gets more reps, and that's a guy that's another name we've heard around camp as of today. Like, okay, so you get to see what that's all about at an extended rate. For me as a West Virginia fan, it's going to be, there's Will Greeter who's going to pick up some garbage time fourth quarters or whatever. So yeah, all right, put him out there. Like, that'll be fun for me to watch when we're probably in a game with the Ravens backups and we're losing like 17-3. Like, who cares, right? But you still get to see those guys in there and see what they do at a equal or better level in the NFL. I don't know. There's a little novelty to it. Obviously, those reps matter to the teams and to the players, but as fans, I just think there's a little bit of novelty to it. And then, by the time the season starts, you can sit there and then say, oh, remember that one guy in preseason? Like, why isn't the coach playing him? Like, blah, blah. Then you can go on Twitter and talk about it. You've been a fan since day one, and you're the only one with, like, the backup punter's jersey or something.
Yeah, man. That's
it's great. It's fun. It's fun.
Man, the Paul Turner stories and stories like that where guys just like light it up in the preseason. It would suck to lose that, man. And I do understand with the injuries and all that stuff. And obviously probably just a money standpoint. Let's be honest, it is the National Football League, but it would suck to lose that. And I feel like I wish honestly, as football's getting more global, I think people will buy into that. Like, it's cool to watch. It's kind of like Last Chance U live, right? You're getting to watch these guys, and now that the practices are kind of more covered, training camp and all that stuff, like you're getting to know these guys a bit more. You're rooting for them. It's kind of awesome to see them out there competing, man. And how often you get a chance to kind of watch a guy compete for his livelihood and compete for his career and do so in a way where he's really putting it out on the line there, man. And it would suck to lose that, but we're fortunate this year. We get 3 preseason games. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of guys like really, really, that are in true, battles per se, maybe towards the bottom of the roster. But it feels like most of the positions, we're going to see how the secondary kind of shakes out and what that looks like. We're going to see how much guys like Nolan Smith play. But for the most part, it feels like we know what this roster is going to look like. Is there any guys, and I know we'll probably talk about this next week, right before the fact, but is there any guys, kind of early predictions that you might think might pop off? Are you excited to see?
Yeah, Shipley, Will Shipley.
Okay.
That's my guy. I've kind of put out. I think I was the one that put out maybe a poll, or maybe we did a poll on the Flippin' the Birds Twitter. Maybe it wasn't my personal one.
Okay.
But it was obviously it was between who would you say would be the backup to Saquon? Would it be Shipley or would it be Gainwell? And I think Shipley was the winner of that poll. So I think that's kind of a position battle that I'm willing to watch anyway. And I think I'm low key rooting for Shipley, but if that brings out the best in Gainwell, then it's great for Philadelphia. But that's my most interesting, position battle. But that in between general linebackers, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm really excited to see how the linebackers do and who's playing and how much. And that kind of includes Nolan Smith. I think it'll be really interesting to see how he looks, especially doing things that we thought he might need to take a while to work on, rushing the passer. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to do that. Second year is when a lot of these things kind of start to click, and you just kind of get the idea when you hear him talk. He's a clearly intelligent player, hungry, loves being in Philly. It would be really awesome to see some improvement early on from him, because I think if you get him rolling as a rotational guy, that would be a big problem for opposing offenses. So maybe not a surprise, but I am really interested to see how he looks. Anaya Smith, for me, man, on offense is going to be a really exciting one to watch. I think he's just got some special tangible skills that not a whole bunch of guys have, and in terms of his ability in space, his movement. He's just an exciting player to watch, and he's going to get hopefully quite a few opportunities to have the ball in his hands. I think they'll probably try him out returning some on specials and et cetera, et cetera. He's just kind of a lightning in a bottle kind of player. He'll create something out of nothing, and he's one of those guys that make preseason watching pretty fun, because I think they'll just design some plays to get him the ball in his hands early and often, and see how he works. But excited to see him as well. Could be a big step in the right direction if he's able to perform well early and get into rhythm, because that talked about that wide receiver 3 position, that wide receiver 4 position should be plenty of opportunities there during the season.
Yeah, and I gotta say, with that particular role, I do think, and Brian would bring this up, but Paris Campbell is probably going to be, he's probably going to have the leading role come week 1, because as a veteran, and looking at reports today, it seems like Smith is struggling a little bit. Kind of getting used to the systems in the NFL where he's being covered, he's just not performing well. He's not maybe creating space. Struggles could be a ton of things, but either way, sounds like he's struggling in training camp. I think that kind of says, hey, there's going to be a little bit more development than anybody really anticipated. Because we always talk about how all of these strengths could be, proclaimed, we can accentuate the positives, but here it is, he's not really having the smoothest of training camp. So you're going to see more of a veteran stance, I think, come week 1. That probably does mean like Paris Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen often with receivers. I think that's why I'm hopeful to see the game, because you talk about a guy like even Jamar Chase. There was rumors of him, first round pick. He was dropping footballs, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some guys that are just gamers, and so I'm hoping that once he gets in the game, you might have some issues with the route running, et cetera, but what he does with the ball in his hands, it's special. And so I'm hoping, throw him a quick screen. You got to catch it still, but get the ball in your hands early, make some things happen. That's a good way to get on a roster, right? And so you're talking about a team too that, as much as Britton Covey was a spark plug for them last year, you're not really sure what you're going to do with the return game. Here's an option, a young guy that you can develop early. Again, just find ways to get the ball in his hands. Or again, like you said, maybe those struggles continue. You never know, right? So, one of those opportunities to play an actual game, to find out what you got. It's an exciting time. Training camp's just around the corner. But yeah, I feel like we've touched on a lot here. We're going to keep it short this week, knowing that, have the full preseason pod next week. Any final thoughts, Eric?
No, I think we got a lot of the, little tidbits, little interesting tidbits about training camp, at least from over the weekend and through today, out of the way. And now it's, back to observing and figuring out maybe where else to go with these topics for next week. Also, you can, guarantee that we're going to be talking about Sirianni and Hurts forever. So we at least know we're starting with that. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Yeah. We might as well just put that as part of the intro.
Yeah. Disclaimer. We're going to start with that.
Yeah. I mean, with that, I'm Morgan Burkett alongside Eric Reese. We'll have Brian back next week. Yeah, man, there's going to be Eagles football on next week. Get excited. And with that, go Birds.
Go Birds.
Yes, sir. All right.
Flipping the birds. Flipping the birds.